I'm Dr. John Gartner.
And I'm Dr. Harry Segal.
And welcome to another session of Shrinking Trump.
John, this is our 45th show. We've been doing this since April. And, we tried during the campaign to alert the media, the political elites, the public, to warn them of Donald Trump's severe psychopathology, his early onset of dementia, but more importantly, his severe personality disorder, which accounts for his pathological lying, his criminal behavior, his pleasure in dominating, extorting, and controlling others. And especially, as John and I have been talking about, because we are both experts in personality disorders, that unconsciously Trump has a desire to destroy. And he really does destroy everything that he touches. This week, and we've been off for 2 weeks, so we're back refreshed and ready. But we're also exhausted already by how terrible the last few weeks have been, right, John?
Yeah. We're thinking of entitling this segment "The Extortionist in Chief," because Trump really is running a criminal regime. It's been a blitzkrieg of criminality, a blitzkrieg of imposing Project 2025. But we're going to play a little piece of tape from David Brooks that you found that really kind of puts it all in a perspective, which is that Trump's basic MO, and this is now, we're going to see this across a dozen different settings and a dozen different issues and a dozen different players, it's the simple mafia formula. Nice bakery you got here. It'd be a shame if anything happened to it. Basically, that's his go-to strategy. That's not his last resort. That's his first resort. That's his modus operandi. Why don't we hear what David Brooks has to say?
Yeah, people call Trump a transactional politician, but he's an extortionist. That's actually a difference. The transaction is we do a deal. Extortion is I bully you until you give me what I want. And so that's what we're seeing here. Now, I put myself in the shoes of, say, the president of Colombia, the head of Paul Weiss. And I think, well, if I compromise with Trump, I'm hurting my institution. But if I lose $400 million, I'm also hurting my institution. These are real choices that people have to make. And I understand that. In the case of Colombia, I personally think that Trump requests or demands, or whatever it is, are kind of reasonable. And Colombia should have done all this stuff 5 or 10 years ago. They really did get ideologically out of control. And if they're publicly funded, partially publicly funded, then you've got a problem. And they created this problem. So I understand why I got to save my university. I got to save $400 million. On the other hand, caving into an extortionist rarely pays off because he will say, oh, I take that. Here's my next demand. Here's my next demand. And if you look at the history of Zelensky, Macron, all the people who've tried to cozy up to the extortionist, they've all ended up losing in the end. And so I think it's time for the universities as a body, and we saw this with the Princeton president, to say no more deals. We are standing up because there will be a time, again, I don't think this is quite the time to sort of beat down the Trump administration. There will be a time where everybody has to hold together and stand up and say, no more deals.
I think David Brooks said a lot of important things in that video. First of all, he is describing his basic method as extortion. And he's also being very, I think, empathic about the extortion victims, right? They're really in a dilemma, right? A real dilemma. What do? Do I hurt my institution by submitting, or do I hurt my institution by taking the consequences? I think the most important thing that he's saying is, it reminds me of what Benjamin Franklin said. If we don't hang together, we will surely hang separately. And that's what he's saying, is that the method of extortion is to try to pick people off so everyone feels they have to fall in line. But if all the law firms, if all the media, if all the universities stuck together, it would be more powerful than letting him pick us off one by one.
Right, but that means that they have to choose short-term loss and risk being knocked out completely. But as David Brooks was saying, if we don't do it, eventually everyone gets destroyed by the extortion. Right. Everybody does.
Right. And the other point that he made is that it never stops. It's like, the blackmailer never stops, right? So making people keep making the same mistake. Okay, if I bend the knee, then I can go back to my life. No, then you have to bend the other knee. Then you have to prostrate yourself altogether. I mean, then you have to, well, okay, I'm not going to get obscene, but you get the idea. It gets worse.
It has to get worse. I had friends who visited Russia. This is even before the time of Putin, when the Russian mafia was in control. And they were in a medium-sized city, and they had a pizzeria. And the mob came in and said, we want 25%. And so they worked really hard, and they really made it work. And then the mafia came in and said, we want 50%. And they closed the pizzeria because they couldn't make any money. This is what happens.
This is what happens. And the reason we're talking about this today is because one of the things that happened this week is a storied law firm, Paul Weiss, a law firm that goes back really to at least the 50s or 60s, of one of the first law firms that had Jews and Gentiles working together, a very strong democratic law firm. They've sued the government many times over many progressive issues. They're a real institution.
Oh, yeah.
And what Trump has done, and this is the extortion again, is he's issuing executive orders against specific law firms that push democratic issues and sue the government. And in these executive orders, he's barring them from all federal buildings, which, of course, if you go to federal court, means you're out of business. Now, the first executive order was against a democratic or a progressive law firm called Perkins Co., which is a famous one. And they sued. They went to court and sued, and they got a stay on this. So this is in process because this is illegal. But Paul Weiss instead submitted and agreed to do $30 or $40 million worth of pro bono law.
$40 million
worth of pro bono
in causes that,
right.
Yeah, doing
MAGA
for causes that Trump wanted them to defend or sue.
Right, that are counter to their own beliefs. So basically suing for things that are the opposite of their values, just to make the submission, even more degrading. So not only do they have to bend the knee, but now they actually have to work for the fascists, pressing cases that they actually would think are anti-constitutional.
Well, they certainly may. They certainly may. In some cases, we don't know what all the pro bono cases are. But they had to submit to Trump is really what we're talking about. It's a submission.
And look, they do something like $2.6 billion worth of business a year. They have massive federal contracts, and obviously they go to federal court. So you can understand why they would be scared and why they might want to submit, like your friends at the pizzeria, right? But if everybody submits, then of course, it's like Kant's categorical imperative. I don't know how many people remember their freshman philosophy classes, but Kant said you don't need religion to derive morality, which was a very controversial idea at the time in the 1700s. Is that when he was around? About the 1800s? I can't remember.
1800s.
Okay. Still a controversial idea. And he said you can use pure reason to derive morality, because before you commit an action, you ask yourself one question: would I will that everybody does this? So if you're about to steal, would you actually will that everyone steals? Well, then everything would be chaos, and then people would be stealing your stuff. And so, no, you really wouldn't want a world where everybody steals. So it's wrong. Okay. I think this is sort of like that categorical imperative. In other words, would you will that every law firm submit to Trump and no one be able to sue the government when they violate rights or the Constitution? Of course you wouldn't. So from Kant's categorical imperative, the people who are submitting are, in that sense, though they're doing something totally human and understandable, and I'm sympathetic, at that level, they're doing something that is not moral.
Exactly. No, well put, John.
All right. And let's end this. And we're going to talk about Social Security later, but I want to show a little bit out of context. This is the Trump extortionist regime. He's the extortionist in chief, but he's now created an entire regime based on extortion. So let's just give a little example that recently happened. the head of Social Security demanded that Elon Musk have complete access to all of Social Security's records, all of its privacy, blah blah blah, and they refused. So here's how the new acting director of Social Security responded. Federal judge pushes back on acting Social Security head over threat to close agency. I'm sorry, it was the judge that said that Elon Musk could not have access to the data. Leland Dudek backed off his argument that a ruling blocking Elon Musk's cost-cutting team from access to sensitive data could apply to all agency employees. Acting Social Security Director Leland Dudek threatened on Thursday evening to bar all Social Security Administration employees from accessing its computer systems in response to a judge's order blocking the U.S. DOJ service from accessing sensitive taxpayer data. In other words, he said, hey, nice Social Security agency you got here. If you're not going to let Elon Musk in, then we're just going to shut it down. Now, of course, shutting down Social Security would be a little unpopular among the 74 million people who get Social Security checks. So later he said that he had overstepped and he backed down from that ridiculous idea. But my point being is that's always their first impulse. Right? That's their modus operandi. And as we go through the show today, and as we go through the show, I think weeks and weeks going forward, we're just going to keep seeing different examples of how they use extortion. It's the same one-trick pony.
Well, it's what Trump's use of tariffs is. It's just a way of extorting countries to submit to him. That's the whole thing.
And look, as psychologists, we know that Trump is a malignant narcissist, right? And that mob bosses are malignant narcissists. For the most part, I mean, I'm sure there's some good ones. I don't want to generalize, but
I don't think so, John.
I think there's fine people on both sides. Not really. So
some kind sociopath mob bosses who really care about you.
They give you a cigarette or they blow your head off.
They really don't want anything to happen to your company.
They really think it would be a shame if something happened to it.
they have compassion.
They're empathic monsters. It would be a shame. Such a shame.
Can we just tell our audience that there's no such thing as a nice sociopath? They do not exist. By definition, they don't exist.
They can be smooth or charming, but they're not nice. Right. So the next topic that we want to go to, and Harry, I'll let you read some of these. But look, we've been talking about this issue of a constitutional crisis, right?
Yes.
And we've been saying all along, and everyone's been saying it, that if Trump and his administration defies a court order, that's when we'll know we've kind of reached a constitutional crisis. And you've pointed out that, well, if he's violating the lower court orders, that's kind of a semi-constitutional crisis. But the real constitutional crisis with a capital C is going to be if and when he refuses to follow a Supreme Court order. But I would characterize it slightly differently. I would say that this constitutional crisis is a rolling constitutional crisis. Or another way of putting it is a constitutional crisis might be on a spectrum, right? So, there's a difference between 100% and 50%, because this is really a constitutional crisising as a way of life, right? They're now involved in hundreds of suits, right? And they are, to varying degrees, using various methods, right? Evading or defying or deceiving the courts. So let's just go through some of those examples. We found one judge, this Boasberg, who is fighting back. And let's, Harry, maybe you could read that for us.
Justice Department stonewalls federal judge over deportation flights. The Trump administration tried to have the hearing canceled and sought to remove the judge overseeing it as White House officials took a confrontational stance. The Trump administration on Monday stonewalled a federal judge seeking answers about whether the government had violated his order by deporting more than 200 people over the weekend, including those officials identified as members of a Venezuelan criminal gang. The hearing in federal district court in Washington escalated a conflict between the White House and the courts that threatened to become a constitutional crisis. A Justice Department lawyer refused to answer any detailed questions about the deportation flights to El Salvador, arguing that President Trump had broad authority to remove immigrants from the United States with little or no due process under an obscure wartime law known as the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. The tense back and forth in court between the judge, James D. Boasberg, and the Justice Department, Abhishek Kambli, left open the possibility of further conflict down the road. Judge Boasberg directed Mr. Kambli to certify in writing by noon on Tuesday, under seal if needed, that no immigrants were removed after his written order went into effect, a piece of information that will be crucial as the judge seeks to determine whether the Trump administration flouted his authority. Earlier Monday, Mr. Trump's so-called border czar, the hood Tom Homan, I added the hood part, made defiant remarks on television indicating that the administration planned to continue such deportations despite the court's order, an action that could pit one of the co-equal branches of the government against another. "We're not stopping," Mr. Homan said on Monday during an appearance on Fox and Friends. "I don't care what the judges think. I don't care what the left thinks. We're coming."
Yeah, I'm glad you used that hood voice. That was good.
He's such a hood. Have you seen him? Oh my God.
Yeah.
He's out of Central
really
Casting.
Yeah, he is out of Central Casting. So, all right. So here's this confrontation being set up, and let's see how it developed. The Justice Department refuses to give judge flight data, citing state secrets. The extraordinary move by the Justice Department was an escalation of its conflict with the judge in this case, and by extension, the federal judiciary. The Trump administration told a federal judge on Monday night that it would not disclose any further information about 2 flights of Venezuelan immigrants sent to El Salvador this month, despite a court order to turn back the planes, declaring that doing so would jeopardize state secrets. The move sharply escalated the growing conflict between the administration and the judge, and by extension, the federal judiciary, in a case that legal experts fear is precipitating a constitutional crisis. So, Harry, I think we're there. We're there. Now we're just talking about how bad it gets, but we're there.
Well, we are, and part of the jerking around that the government is doing is they're saying we haven't violated a court order. So they're saying they're not, even though they are.
Right. No, that's right. So they're using all of these, and excuse me for using this word, but I'd like to introduce a new technical word. It's called fuckery. Okay. They're fucking with everything. And there's all different methods of fuckery. All right. But it's all towards a common purpose. Okay. Because another method of fuckery is just outright lying and deception. Like, for example, Harry, why don't we, if you don't mind, you don't have to say fuckery.
Did you get this term from like Victorian pornography or something? The fuckery.
It sounds fuckery. It does sound like something from Victorian pornography, but I actually I'm coining this term myself.
I see. Okay, very good.
Another manifestation of fuckery,
yes,
is to just simply outright lie to the court. So, sure. Harry, would you mind reading this article?
Sure. What is Doge? Trump says one thing, government lawyers say another. The Department of Government Efficiency, described in court filings, bears little resemblance to the no-holds-barred approach taken by Elon Musk and praised by President Trump. What is the Department of Government Efficiency? It's a question that's come up over and over again in the avalanche of court cases challenging the authority of Elon Musk, the world's richest man, to conduct a full throttle effort to gut and remake the federal government. Over 2 months of litigation playing out across more than 170 lawsuits, the government has offered limited answers, but insisted on one thing, that Mr. Musk exercises no authority over the office and is not even an employee.
So 170 lawsuits, and they're just lying. They're just, it reminds me of the Monty Python, first Monty Python film, and now for something completely different. And the guy has a dead parakeet in the cage. And he said, "This parakeet you sold me is dead." And the guy goes, "No, it's not." He goes, "Just look at it." And then he pushes the dead bird across the cage. He goes, "See, it just moved, but you moved it with your hand." I mean, it's obvious that Elon Musk is the head of Doge. He said it 100 times on X. President Trump has said it. They both said it together from the Oval Office. They both said it together from the cabinet room. They're just lying. But it's a good way to throw sand in the gears of these 170 lawsuits. Okay. Yeah. And what other ways are they trying to derail these suits? Well, one is they're threatening to impeach the judges who rule against them. Now, that's one thing that actually got Supreme Court Justice Roberts upset. He actually rebuked Trump in a rare rebuke, saying that's not how we work in America. We don't impeach judges for rulings we don't like. So he gave him a real talking to, as if that's going to make any difference. But now, with the supine Congress who are aiding and abetting the coup, look at some of the creative ideas Mike Johnson has about things that Congress could do to put coercive pressure on the judiciary.
So there's a natural tension between the branches of the government, and we're working through that. The Judiciary Committee is looking at alternatives. One of the bills that I really like that's already been through committee was authored by Representative Darrell Issa, and that would limit the scope of federal injunctions, the ability of one individual judge to abuse the system in this way. And it would be, in my view, a dramatic improvement on that. So we'll be moving, I think, that piece of legislation and some others to address it, because we have an Article I authority under the Constitution to do that. We do have authority over the federal courts, as you know. We can eliminate an entire district court. We have power funding over the courts and all these other things. But desperate times call for desperate measures, and Congress is going to act. So stay tuned for that. Thank you.
So there you go again, right to the extortion. Yeah, nice federal court. You got here, a really nice federal court. It'd be a shame if we defunded it.
No, he's so vile, and he always speaks in such a kind of self-righteous way. Like, well, we're just trying to do what we're trying to do. I mean, we're in charge of things in desperate times, calls for different measures. I mean, what a monster! And he's such a hypocrite. Now, there's no way that the Senate is ever going to vote to do any of that, and they're never going to impeach any judges, at least while we have this many Democratic senators. It would take more than 60 votes to impeach a judge, take 2/3. But the fact that they're even talking about it is dangerous and reckless. And I don't know how Mike Johnson looks in the mirror. I just don't.
Yeah. Well, actually, vampires have no reflection, so that's not a problem. But and I'm gonna take another controversial position here about where I think the constitutional crisis and the rule of law is being challenged.
You don't have another new word, though, do you? Not another new word.
No. This is we're not fuckering around here. I think that the judges, and these are good judges. They've been involved in many cases. We've seen their name in the paper many times. You know, we know who these Washington federal judges are. They're good people. So I'm not trying to malign them. But one of the things that I've always said about Democrats is they underreact. That in general, people, we are weak in our response to aggression. We don't use the appropriate force to defend ourselves. So what's happening in a lot of these cases is these judges on, let's call them technical grounds. And here's why I know we're going to get lots of comments in the comments. So let me just anticipate this. Every time I criticize a judge, okay, I get tons of comments saying, "You're not a lawyer, stick to your knitting," you know.
Come on.
Yeah.
No, it's
What?
fine if they argue with us. It's okay.
No.
But make your point.
I'm not trying to tell you not to, I'm just anticipating your argument, and I'm going to meet it. Look, let me put it to you this way. Judge Judy from the People's Court said, "Don't pee on my leg and tell me it's raining." Okay. I may not be a lawyer, but I have eyes and ears. Okay. We can see that there is a massively illegal, right, a purging of the government. Right. It's illegal at so many levels. It's happening so many ways. They fired all the inspector generals. That's illegal. They're firing all of these people who are heads of independent agencies that are not under the executive control. That's illegal. They're firing all these people they're firing all the recent hires without cause. That's illegal. But what I'm finding is these judges are reluctant to put a stay on these actions, right, while it's adjudicated. So, for example, in a lot of these mass firings, and I'm forgetting which judge this was, he said, "This is horrible. This is probably not legal, but I'm not going to put a stay on it because actually this should come before the Labor Relations Board." There's massive firings. Well, look, if a crime is in progress and it's illegal, don't just kick it to another jurisdiction. Okay, this is not a labor dispute. This is actually an assault on the Constitution. I was also very critical of Judge Chutkan, who I normally am very grateful for, when she said that she did not put a stay on Elon Musk's getting access to the Treasury data with all of our privacy, and where he could compromise the software either by sucking up the data himself or allowing a malign actor to have access to it, or just simply weakening the defenses so there'd be a backdoor, all the above. And Judge Chutkan said that the plaintiffs had not shown that there would be irredeemable harm, right, irreparable harm, right, if she didn't put a stay. I'm sorry, if Russia gets access to all of our financial data and software, that's irreparable harm. That's irreparable harm on a massive scale. Okay.
Right.
And so once again, I want to criticize one of our judges. Okay. Something very dramatic happened at a little institution on the Mall that I've never heard of called the Institute for Peace, but it's been around for 40 years. It was established in the Eisenhower administration. Okay. And it's a independent agency. It is not under the executive branch. It was established by Congress and set up as an independent agency. But Trump has come in. He fired all the board members, for no cause, which he's not allowed to do. Ex officio, the head of the Department of State and the head of Defense are automatically members. So with the ex officio members, he voted in this new stooge. And the guy who was the head of the Institute of Peace said, "No way, I'm not going to do it." This happened with one of the inspector generals, too, by the way, who refused to leave, and the police carted him out. Well, something similar happened here, except it was a drama. This battle went on for about 48 hours. I think it's interesting. There was a battle at the Institute of Peace where he said, "No way, you can't come in." And he changed the key card code, and because he knew that the people who provide security for the Institute provide security for all the places on the Mall, and they would side with their employer, the federal government, and even though they've known these guys for years and these are their friends, they would turn on them and then invade their place. So he canceled all their key cards and sort of barricaded himself in, but they found a side way in and then they carted him out. But he made a kind of a Texas Last Stand, there at the Institute for Peace. All of this context is, I want to show you how the federal judge reacted. Judge denies bid to stop DOJ's efforts to take over the U.S. Institute of Peace. In denying the former board member's request for relief, Howell said it is, quote, and this is a quote, undisputed that their removals were not in accordance with federal law, but found that they had not made the required showing for a temporary restraining order. Still, Howell had harsh words for DOJ and the Trump administration officials. Treatment of the Institute of Peace employees, including Moose. "I'm very offended by how DOJ has operated at the Institute and treated American citizens trying to do a job that they were tasked to do," she said. So
Well,
very
she took them to the woodshed, all right. Boy,
yeah,
that had big impact.
big impact because they're very sensitive about disappointing people. They really like they could kill us.
Listen, I'm not making an excuse for them. I think you're absolutely right. It's despicable, but we have a Congress that will do whatever Trump says. I mean, Congress isn't going to stop them for doing any of this.
All the more reasons the judges have to step up.
Exactly, but I'm just saying that. I mean, imagine this. Imagine we have a Congress that isn't saying, "Wait a minute, this is our purview. This is our responsibility."
No, I don't have to imagine it. It's happening. And here's the other reason where I think these judges are missing the point. We know that the law moves slowly, and that's it in part by design and just part the way it is. But this is a forest fire, right? This is a blitzkrieg, right? This is a crime in progress, okay? If there are people with stockings over their faces and machine guns breaking into the Institute for Peace and saying we're going to kill everybody, the answer isn't, well, we'll just have to review that in a year.
It's undisputed, but we'll review it.
It's legally undisputed, but we won't do anything to stop them. And I think a great example of this is the inspectors general. Okay, the inspectors general who were fired sued. They sued a month ago. Nothing has happened so far with their suit. It's moving. It's wending its way through the courts. Okay, but think about this for a minute. He fired all the inspector generals. We know it's illegal. If you can read a newspaper or watch a television set, then you probably know that it's illegal. And he did it 17 times, okay? The problem with letting this wend its way through the courts rather than putting a stay on those firings is that once those inspector generals are out of the building, right, their files may disappear, their investigations will go cold, their staff will disappear. Even if they were reinstated 6-9 months from now, you've already removed the gatekeepers. You already removed the people who were supposed to be watching what the department is doing, and they've been unmonitored for 9 months. And now he's back on the job, but he's working with a crew that doesn't even know him. His records are, in other words, they're making the suit moot by not stopping the crime in progress and then evaluating.
No, John, you're absolutely right. They're colluding, and maybe not intentionally, but they are colluding. And that means that this rolling coup, as you like to say, rolls on.
Exactly. It makes progress. It's moving forward. There are no inspector generals. Poof. And that's a real check and balance, a serious check and balance. And they're meant to be independent for just this reason. So just this thing could not happen. And the judges should understand that.
Yes, they should.
So comment away, people, but I'm pissed off. All right. So, Harry, we've talked about the sense of a race. What's going to happen first? Is Trump going to collapse cognitively so he can't do any more harm before he, burns down the government, et cetera? I think there's another race that we need to worry about. I think that he is alienating the American people. I mean, right now, there's still a relatively high approval rating, but if you screw up Social Security, you're going to make 7 million people mad. You tank the stock market, well, you're going to make a lot of people mad. You have mass firings in the government, you're going to make a lot of people mad. You deport, immigrants who have relationships with people, you're going to make people mad. You raise prices, you raise inflation, you're going to make people mad. You take away their rights, you're going to make people mad. So lots of people are getting really, really mad. And in fact, we had a special election. Oh, well, I'm not going to get into that yet. But hold on to that thought. But here's the thing. The race. So if you do that, right, then it's logical that in the midterm elections, right, we should get the House back, right? So in some ways, it's like, well, good, let him alienate everybody because then he'll be in trouble. The problem is on the other end of the race is how quickly can they seize control of the electoral system So the opinion of the American people won't matter anymore. You know, a lot of people talking about him canceling elections and that whether he will or won't. I don't think he will cancel elections. I'm actually not afraid of that or worried about that. What I'm worried about is rigging elections, so that then he can control the outcome. So in terms of this race, we're going to look at one side and the other. First, let's look at the people rebelling against Trump side of the equation. Harry, maybe you could read that article.
Democrats flip deep red Pennsylvania district in special election. Shocker. No Democrat had ever won this ancestrally Republican seat, but it's now the second Democratic pickup of the year. Democrats pulled off an astonishing upset in a special election for the Pennsylvania Senate on Tuesday night as East Petersburg Mayor James Andrew Malone defeated Republican Josh Parsons by a 50-49 margin to flip a district Donald Trump carried by 15 points last year. Those top lines, however, don't tell the complete story of just how ancestrally Republican Pennsylvania's 36th district is. Since taking its present form in Lancaster County 40 years ago, the district has always been held by the GOP, and the county as a whole has gone for a Democrat at the presidential level just once in 1856. Right. Lyndon Johnson just barely won it in 1964. Now, this is a Pennsylvania Senate seat. This is not a seat in the Congress, but it's a bellwether. It is. It's the canary in the coal mine, isn't it?
It is, exactly. So this is one of the powerful forces working in our favor. Look, I mean, Trump's capacity to alienate people, I think, is unrivaled, really. I mean, everybody hates this man. I mean, he's probably the most hated human being on planet Earth.
No, John. That's not true. There are many, 40% of the country love this guy. He is divisive. So the people who hate him, but the smaller percentage of people who love him would die for him. No,
I said planet Earth.
What's that?
I said planet Earth, not America, because everyone in all the other countries hates him.
Oh, okay. But
I mean, there are pygmies in Africa who can't even speak English and go, Trump bad.
All right. Keep going. I shouldn't quibble.
Okay, but on the other hand, and let's look at what he's trying to do to make sure that doesn't matter. Trump signs executive order requiring proof of citizenship in federal elections. Election experts said Trump was claiming power he does not have, all but guaranteeing lawsuits over the measure. This executive order is unlawful, said Wendy Weiser, vice president for democracy at the Brennan Center for Justice at New York University's School of Law. The president does not have the authority to require this. The president cannot override a statute passed by Congress that says what is required to register to vote on a federal registration form. So here's the play. If you required new voters to produce a passport, which is really the only way I guess you can prove your citizenship other than a birth certificate, but by making it so difficult for people to register to vote, that's one way they're going to try to skew things.
And every state determines elections, so there's going to be a lot of pushback. This is not something he can actually do. But the thing about Trump is he's doing extreme things and waiting to see who's going to stop him. Mm-hmm. That's what he's doing. And you're right, there may be states that go along with this crap. We'll have to see. It's meant to undermine and control the elections, undoubtedly.
Right. And the states that go along with it willingly are are basically collaborators, right? They get the play. They understand what he's trying to accomplish, and they're in favor of it, right? Because the people who have passports are disproportionately older, whiter, richer, right? So that's the electorate that they want to have. The other thing that yeah. So what were you gonna say?
That's actually not true. What he wants is the broad working class to support him. He doesn't want the older educated folks at all. That's not his base. The base is the low information working class voter who is furious with what's happened to the country, feel that they've been left out of all the growth over the past 40 years. And they wanted someone to tear the place apart. And they got their champion. And he's doing it. They just haven't realized yet that he's gutting all of their services. He's gutting the VA. He's going to gut Social Security. He's gutting health care to the states. They just don't know it yet. They don't know anything.
Well, first of all, newly registered voters tend to vote Democratic. So he's talking about making it more difficult for new voters to register, right? The old entrenched voters are more reliable. You've pointed out this law will not pass, but they have proposed the SAVE Act that would stop women from voting if they've changed their name when they got married and they don't have a passport to prove they're an American citizen. So that would be about half the women who were married in this country do not have passports. That
will never pass the Senate ever.
Right.
So remember, we have to distinguish between what the House passes, which they often do knowing it will not be approved of by the Senate, and the stuff that's getting through both houses of Congress. That's what we have to worry about.
Another act that he has proposed is that green card holders, before they're granted citizenship, first their social media account will be perused by the government. So in other words, we're only going to give citizenship to people who have right-wing Twitter accounts, okay, not left-wing Twitter accounts.
Nice.
And finally, but that's not all. And again, that's not all. Now, how much would you pay if we threw in a slicer and dicer? The thing is, here's back where we get to the fuckery concept, okay? These are all different ways he's fucking with the system. It's not one way, right? It's every way that they can think of. And now today, just today, we had to alter the show. Of course, we always have too much media, and then we burden our wonderful producer Rex, okay, with extra media at the last minute, because today he had a new executive order about voter suppression. Let's see it. Maybe you could read that, Harry.
Trump is trying to gain more power over elections. Is his effort legal? By the way, this is from the New York Times. A far-reaching executive order aims to reshape the country's voting laws, is sure to be challenged in court, and reflects the president's concerted push to expand his power. The order's most eye-catching provisions are the requirements of proof of citizenship and the return of mail ballots by Election Day. But the order, which threatens to withhold federal funding from states that do not comply with it, includes a range of other measures. It's an attempt at a power grab, said Richard L. Hassan, an election law expert at UCLA. The president has been seen in the past as having no role to play when it comes to the conduct of federal elections. And this attempt to assert authority over the conduct of federal elections would take power away from both an independent federal agency and from the states.
Now I know what you're going to say. Good luck with that. The states control elections, right? That would be your point. Would I be right about that? Okay, sure. Right. But again, the extortion, right? He's already threatening to withhold funding, and that could be maybe all federal funding from states that don't comply with his fuckery.
Exactly. I mean, remember, we began the show by talking about him as an extortionist.
Exactly.
And John, you talked about this being done all over the place. You know what? It's his only move. It's not just it's the only move he has. And he uses it in all these different ways.
Right. I mean, I have to say, really the mafia should be a little jealous because they've never been this creative with extortion. I mean, he's really found a way. He's taken the genre to a new level.
Well, he's, as far as we know, he's not running drugs and trafficking in women and human beings, right? So there's certain mafia things he's not doing, as far as we know.
A bit of reverse trafficking. He's deporting them all.
Well, he's right. He's doing hideous, destructive things to people in order to leverage it for popularity among his base. That's what he's doing, and it's vicious, and he wants to destroy our democratic norms and our protections.
So here, getting back to what you were saying before, as you said, some states will be willing to go along with it. For one thing, they're not going to be, their aims are consistent, right? I mean, a lot of these southern states have been practicing voter suppression for years. That's why we had the Voter Protection Act.
The Voting Rights Act.
Yeah. Voting Rights Act, excuse me. Yes, I'm getting old and word finding problems. Yes, thank you. The Voter Protection Act, which Roberts invalidated, but it was there precisely because there's a whole bunch of southern states that want to suppress the vote. So they're not going to be unwilling necessarily to go along with what Trump is saying. And some of these are swing states, right? I mean, if Georgia and Arizona and, go along with this, right, then we're taking the swing states off the table. And then, of course, you've got the states who may not want to do it, but you've got the old extortion dilemma again. Nice state you got here. Right.
And I think huge countersuits. I mean, huge. You think the Supreme Court's really going to let the executive take control of state elections? I don't see it. But he's going to try. He's trying everything. He's extorting everyone in every way possible. And he's just waiting to see which ones work.
Yeah.
That's the goal. And if enough of them do, he takes control over the country.
Yeah. So moving on, the other fuckery that's taking place is at Social Security. Harry, maybe you could read it. Maybe you could explicate the fuckery for us.
Sure, but I want to use an English accent every time I say fuckery. The Trump presidency, long waits, waves of calls, website crashes. Social Security is breaking down. A flood of cuts led by Elon Musk has sent the agency into chaos as a new commissioner prepares to take charge. The Social Security Administration website crashed 4 times in 10 days this month because the servers were overloaded, blocking millions of retirees and disabled Americans from logging in to their online accounts. In the field, office managers have resorted to answering phones in place of receptionists because so many employees have been pushed out. Amid all this, the agency no longer has a system to monitor customer experience because that office was eliminated as part of the cost-cutting efforts led by Elon Musk. And the phones keep ringing and ringing. The federal agency that delivers $1.5 trillion a year in earned benefits to 73 million retired workers, their survivors, and poor and disabled Americans is engulfed in crisis, further undermining the already struggling organization's ability to provide reliable and quick service to vulnerable customers, according to internal documents and more than 24 current and former agency employees and officials, customers, and others who interact with Social Security. What's going on is the destruction of the agency from inside out, and it's accelerating, Senator Angus King, independent of Maine, said in an interview. I have people approaching me all the time in their 70s and 80s, and they're beside themselves. They don't know what's coming. King's home state has the country's oldest population. What they're doing now is unconscionable, he said.
They're trying to destroy it from within.
And there's a voting block for you.
Don't mess with that Social Security, Sonny. You'll be in trouble.
Oh boy.
Oh
Just
boy.
wait.
Yeah. Just wait. So, and another part of the country that he's attacking is one that you and I hold dear, aside from the fact that we're old. We're also academics and professors, teachers, part of academia. And look, every revolution, every authoritarian state has the same goal: take control of the universities and to get rid of the intelligentsia, to get rid of people who know enough, who have knowledge that can contradict the great leader. And what he's doing, just like he's trying to collapse Social Security from the inside, he's trying to collapse academia from the inside. Harry, you're going to help us understand, as someone who works at a university, it's a somewhat obscure method that people might not understand, but maybe you can help explain it to us.
They really don't. So this is a speech I give students of mine who are interested in going into academia and want to work at the National Institutes for Health. So let me go back a little bit and give you a broad concept. First of all, in Europe and in Canada, for example, universities are subsidized by the government. That is, university research is subsidized by the government. So in Canada, the great universities are given a pot of money, and then academics within the university write grant applications and have their projects approved of by a panel of faculty who look at it. The United States has always done it differently. So after World War II, when we were flush with money, I mean, we were selling cars to the world, we were rebuilding Europe, Japan, and Germany. The NIH had a tremendous amount of money. And in fact, John and I are clinical psychologists. And one thing you might not know is our degree was invented in 1948 by the National Institutes of Health, because there was such a shortage of psychiatrists to treat World War II soldiers coming home with post-traumatic stress disorder that they needed another discipline to diagnose and treat. And that's where we came from. And the National Institutes for Health paid for the training of clinical psychologists through the 1970s. But here's the bigger picture that I think I want you guys to understand. Universities are subsidized by the government in our system if the people at the universities, the researchers, are doing research that the government wants them to do. This is how it works. So let's say, okay, I'm on faculty at Cornell and I want to do a research project studying loneliness in children. And I want to have a design study over 3 years, and I want to have different samples. And I decide that really, when all is said and done, it's going to cost $1 million. And I write a grant and I submit it to the National Institutes for Mental Health. And they reject it the first time, they reject it the second time. But finally, I get it. Someone supports it and it's approved. Well, not only do I get the $1 million, but Cornell gets a 65% indirect cost grant. That is, they get $650,000 on top of my $1 million. And that's supposedly for indirect costs, meaning it's supposed to pay for me. But really what it is the government's way of subsidizing research that they believe is important, right? And this goes on across the country. And universities negotiate these indirect cost rates with the government, but all the major universities, the great state schools, the Ivy League schools, Duke, all those places have high indirect cost rates because that's how universities are subsidized. And you might have heard, some of you, the old saying, publish or perish. That is, if you didn't publish articles in academia, you wouldn't get tenured. Now it's get grant money or perish. Because you're so valuable, you're bringing money into universities. So what Trump has done, although it's being challenged in the courts, is he's saying, okay, from now on, 15%. So he's just dropped 50% of all the research money that Cornell University and Cornell Medical School has counted on, has operated under for 40 years. And they've done this to universities across the board. And that's not even including what Trump specifically did to Columbia University, which was to cut $400 million of their research funding because he didn't like how they handled the campus protests. So, Rex, I have a slide about this just to show you. Judge issues preliminary injunction blocking Trump cuts to NIH research overhead payments. A federal judge on Wednesday issued a nationwide preliminary injunction blocking the Trump's administration from slashing NIH payments for research overhead, a decision that suggests plaintiffs seeking to overturn the sweeping policy changes are likely to eventually succeed. The order halts implementation of a cap on payments for indirect costs, facility and administrative fees linked to research, while the judge hears full arguments in 3 lawsuits that will determine the fated billions of federal dollars that flow to universities, medical centers, and other grant recipients. So that's the real story, folks. He's making a huge cut. And it's not like a thoughtful administration that doesn't want to destroy everything is saying, you know what, this is too much money for us right now. We're going to gradually reduce overhead, indirect costs from 65% to something lower, and you have time to prepare over the next 10 years. This is slash and burn. It was announced in one day. And thankfully, this judge, John, issued a statement.
Thank God. Thank God. I mean, because they're trying to collapse the entire American higher education system all at once, literally trying to destroy it and collapse it from the inside. I mean, look, what institution could survive? You say, well, all of a sudden on a dime, you have half as much money as you budgeted and as you expected to get. No one can survive that. I mean, and actually, ironically, the best universities, which have the most research grants, are the ones that are the most vulnerable. So, for example, Johns Hopkins, the institution that I've been associated with now for many years, they had, and this is more than just the indirect cost issue, Harry, because again, when it comes to fuckery, they don't fuck around. There's all kinds of ways to fuck with people. Okay. So not only are they doing the indirect costs, which you're right to point out, it's really systemic, right? I mean, this is like one stroke of the pen that could bring down like all the research universities. Okay. But they've also, when they stopped all USAID grants, well, Hopkins had an $800 million USAID grant that they suddenly lost. Boom, $1 million gone today. They had to fire 2,200 people. Now, most of them were international. I don't think that makes it any less dire. These are people who are out in the field, curing malaria. Now they don't have money to get home on their on a return ticket. But the other thing they've done is freeze the payments on grants that already exist. So I have professors that, I know personally, socially, and treatment, and I'm hearing the details about the checks aren't coming through. And I'm talking to somebody who's saying, look, I got 20 people who work in my lab. I don't want to fire anybody,
Well, John, it gets even worse. And the Doge people also got told NIH that the credit cards they were using to pay for expenses have a $1 limit. Like they've been messing with them at every level. And
every level, right. Fuckery at every level. That's my point.
Maybe we have to add something, which is extortion is the mode that he has, but of course he's also attacking people he hates and just causing them damage, just beating them with a cane, that kind of thing. So there's also that too. Well, speaking about how disturbed he is, one of the things that we've established, I think the one fact we have established is that he's a malignant narcissist. And one of the things about narcissists, they're very sensitive to how they're portrayed. They're very upset if they're not idealized. If you live in North Korea, I've read a number of memoirs about people who live in North Korea. So I'm not just making this up. If you live in North Korea, there's a minder in every town that makes sure that you're doing the right thing. And one of your greatest responsibilities is to make sure that you honor the portrait of the dear leader. It should be framed. It should hold a place of honor in your home. And I read about people whose entire families were sent to the gulag. Why? They allowed too much dust to settle on the portrait of the dear leader. This is a true story. I'm not making this. It's not hyperbole. It's so vicious. I hate him so much.
Right. And look at how our dear leader feels about portraiture. I'm going to read this quote. So here's a picture. For those of you who are just listening, there's a painting of Donald Trump. He does look a little fat, I have to admit. So it's maybe not the most complimentary portrait, but it's meant to be complimentary. It's hanging in the Colorado State House or governor's office. I'm not sure exactly where, but an official place in Colorado. And Trump is very, very upset that the likeness is not complimentary enough. So this is what he posted on Truth Social. Nobody likes a bad picture or painting of themselves, but the one in Colorado in the state capitol, put up by the governor along with the other presidents, was purposefully distorted to a level that even I perhaps have never seen before. The artist also did President Obama, and he looks wonderful. Well, that's because he's good looking and you're not. But the one of me is truly the worst. She must have lost her talent as she got older. In any event, I would much prefer not having a picture than having this one. But many people from Colorado have called and written to complain. In fact, they are actually angry about it. I'm speaking on their behalf, oh, I'm sure, to the radical left governor Jared Polis, who was extremely weak on crime, in particular with respect to Tren de Aragua, which is practically took over Aurora. Don't worry, we saved it. To take it down, take the picture down, Jared should be ashamed of himself.
Hey.
Look at the how easily narcissistically injured the dear leader is, right? By anything that doesn't idealize him.
Well, what we said is that, Eddie, there's no injury too small for him to not react to.
Right, exactly. No injury too small. But Harry, we've taken care of it. We fixed it. We fixed the picture. For those of you who are just listening, it's the portrait, but it's got the little Kotex on his ear. Just a little shrinking Trump humor there. But and now we can go swimming and horseback riding and all this. That's right. So you can go and do all that again. But another reason not to worry, Harry, not to worry about this portrait issue is...
Good. Tell me.
Yeah, well, because Vladimir Putin has commissioned a portrait of Trump, and this one is much nicer. Let's hear about it. It's a beautiful story. Really. It's very touching.
In the second visit that I had, it got personal. The President Putin had commissioned a beautiful portrait of President Trump from the leading Russian artist, and actually gave it to me and asked me to take it home to President Trump, which I brought home and delivered to him. It's been reported in the paper, but it was such a gracious moment, and told me a story, Tucker, about how when the president was shot, he went to his local church and met with his priest and prayed for the president, not because he was the president of he could become the president of the United States, but because he had a friendship with him and he was praying for his friend. It was, can you imagine sitting there and listening to these kind of conversations? And I came home and delivered that message to our president and delivered the painting, and he was clearly touched by it. So this is the kind of connection that we've been able to reestablish through, by the way, a simple word called communication.
So it's really very touching.
Listen, that guy is so terrible. I think he deserves the Flying Fickle Finger a Fate Award for this week.
And now it's time to give the Flying Fickle Finger a Fate Award.
He deserves a finger, all right. But it's so touching. He loves him so much. He went to the church and prayed for him, not because he was the president, but because he loves him.
But John, this guy bought the story that Putin goes to church and talks to a priest.
Right, it's ridiculous. But also, look who's commissioning the beautiful portraits of Trump. Are they going to hang that in the Kremlin too? Well, why not?
Why not?
So, Harry, we keep having this ongoing dialogue about, is Trump a Russian asset, right? Well, I think if they're making portraits of you in the Kremlin, that's sort of one mark on my side, because they don't usually do that for people who aren't Russophiles. But here's something a little more specific. You and I know as psychologists, right, we listen very carefully to the specific wording that people use. It can be very important, right? What the choice of words, a Freudian slip, whatever. Okay. So one of the things that I think is really important in terms of whether Trump is a Russian asset is he echoing the Kremlin's talking points? I don't mean in general. I mean specifically. I mean maybe word for word.
Let's see.
Zelensky shouldn't have allowed this war to happen.
He's no angel. He shouldn't have allowed this war to happen.
Zelensky had a desire to fight Russia.
Zelensky decided that I want to fight.
Zelensky is gambling with World War III.
You're gambling with World War III.
Zelensky's poll ratings are low.
His poll numbers aren't particularly great.
So, Ukraine has to have elections if it wants to sit at the negotiating table.
When they want a seat at the table, you could say the people have to, wouldn't the people of Ukraine have to say, like, you know, it's been a long time since we've had an election.
Zelensky is disrespectful because he is used to talking to the Biden idiot.
What you're doing is very disrespectful. That wasn't with me. That was with a guy named Biden, who is not a smart person.
There is great probability that Ukraine will become Russia.
They may be Russian someday.
Americans have adopted our point of view.
What has been said in this studio for a long time is now being said by the American administration.
It's such a pleasure to watch. We rejoice whenever this happens in the enemy camp.
We rejoice when this happens in the enemy camp.
Wow.
I mean, and the thing is like what I think we've proven this to agree that is statistically significant. What are the odds, right? That word for word, again and again and again, the exact same words.
Well, they obviously gave him his points talking.
Exactly my point. Now, the last story we're going to cover is actually, you know, the story that's been on everyone's mind. Everyone's been talking about the Signal disaster, right?
Right.
And we could have opened with that, but I think we really wanted to take this broader view, not just deal with the crisis du jour or the scandal du jour, but really this broader view, talking about the extremist. We still want to talk about it. Now, one of the things that people sort of challenged us on, right, is that during the campaign, when he was publicly available for these long talks, sometimes late at night, we really saw a breakdown in his thought process. We really saw the dementia in action. But now that things are much more tightly controlled and edited, and we're not seeing it as much. So a lot of people are saying, well, is it really there? You know, what happened to it? And we said, wait for it, because it's going to manifest itself. So we're going to talk about the Signal disaster. But first, let's hear Trump's explanation.
Somebody in my group either screwed up or it's a bad signal. You know, it's a bad signal, happens to. But it seems to be maybe came in with a staffer, and it was by accident, from what we can tell. We'll know pretty much today, I think. But we have some pretty good guys checking out the phones. But it's something that is not a big deal, other than you want to find out who did it and how they did it. Because you don't want to happen, you know, in the future. You can have that happen.
But so the first thing he says is, well, maybe it was a bad signal. It was a bad signal. Like what? Like it should have been green, but it turned to red. I mean, what do you mean it's a bad signal? He's basically free associating to the word signal, right? Signal is the app, signal.
He forgot what it was about when he was answering the question.
Exactly.
And so he kind of, the signal kind of linked to other associations, like maybe it was a bad signal. Like, I mean, okay, these things happen. It was a bad signal. And that's a real slippage. We haven't seen that in a while, because you're right, John, things are very tightly scripted and controlled. And also, you know, he's risen to the occasion. The speech before Congress, he was reading from the teleprompter fairly well. But look at that, when he's got a cold, and he's tired, and he's also, understandably, I understand, furious about this.
Mm-hmm.
He is loose. He can't keep his mental associations together.
So look, we know this is the gang that couldn't coup straight. They're just incompetent. Stephen Colbert said, a lot of people say that people in this administration are evil, but that's not fair. They're also stupid.
Exactly.
This is just a boneheaded, amateurish, right? Stupid, careless error. They shouldn't even been using like a locally available app, to be. I mean, it should be in a skiff when when you're talking about war plans. You shouldn't be, putting it on. It's encrypted. I guess Russia can't decrypt that. Of course they can. One of the members on the chain was literally physically in the Kremlin when the message came through.
No, it's terrible. They're doing this on phones. And people are really saying, is particularly the Pentagon, that this is Pete Hegseth is just so out of his depth.
Yeah,
he's such an amateur. He has no experience running anything like this, and he's he's stupid. He's not. I mean, he's a second string Fox and Friends morning host on Saturdays. I mean, this is a guy with a drinking problem. It was really a terrible problem, but it wasn't just him. Tulsi Gabbard was on that call. Marco Rubio was on that call. Mike Waltz, who actually is the only person there who I think is not as terrible as everybody else, may get fired for this. He may end up being the fall guy because he's the one who put Greenberg on the email, the text chain. In any case, but there were hearings this week. And I just want to take a moment to talk about Chrissy Houlihan, who I think emerged as a great hero of those hearings. And look, Jim Hines was great. A lot of people were very tough. I actually watched all of it. But when she came on, she just lit up the room. And I really, you know me, in our shows, John has many things to get to. And I like to dig into something just for like 3 or 4 minutes. And I thought it would be good for all of you to watch her. But first, I want to talk about her background that I didn't know about. Rex, could you put that slide up for us? So this is from her Wikipedia page. It says she's an American politician, engineer, and former United States Air Force officer. She spent her childhood on various U.S. naval bases across the country, including on Oahu. Her father, Andrew C.A. Jampoler, a naval aviator, was born in Lviv, Ukraine in 1942 to a Jewish family. He and his mother, who also survived the Holocaust, emigrated to the United States when he was 4 years old. He has become an historian and author. Houlihan, citing her idols as Indiana Jones and Sally Ride, earned her bachelor's degree in engineering from Stanford on an ROTC scholarship, and then earned her master's degree in technology and policy from MIT. I mean, she was in the Air Force. I mean, what kind of resume is this as a Democrat from Illinois? Mm-hmm. Now, listen to how she speaks to Tulsi Gabbard. At first, John Radcliffe, then Tulsi Gabbard, who's saying Pete Hegseth should be here in the committee to protect his honor. And to set this up one more time, Greenberg said that it was a war plan, and then changed it to say that it was an attack plan. And so Hegseth was saying, you see, they're not even getting it right. It wasn't a war plan. Actually, an attack plan is much worse, because an attack plan is something imminent. Their war plans are 1,000 pages long, right? And so Tulsi Gabbard ends this part saying she wished Hegseth was there to defend his honor. And Houlihan goes after her, but she goes after her not as an attack dog, but with a kind of honesty that I found very compelling.
Thank you for the time. And I struggle, and if you look at my notes, I've changed my mind about 1 million times what I'd like to talk about. I'd like to first start with Director Radcliffe. I find it offensive for you to accuse me as a Democrat of not caring about national threats. I very much wanted to talk about those. In fact, had prepared questions in advance of this hearing about those threats, specifically about biosecurity and bioterrorism, but I don't have time to ask those questions because the threat is in the House. The threat is across the dais, and I need to ask these questions. It's my job to ask these questions of you. Because when I served in the military, and I served in classified environments, had this happened to me, I would have walked my resignation in immediately. This is not okay. Communicating these sorts of things in Signal is not okay. Targets, times, those kinds of things are absolutely classified, and we all know it. I know it. These people know it. You all know it. And the fact that we're having to have these conversations now means that I can't ask the questions that I need to ask about things like bioterrorism and biosecurity. And so I'd like to put you in check as well, sir, because you can't assume who I am any more than I can assume who you are, sir. I would like to move my questions, however, over to Director Gabbard, because you are the DNI. You do have an obligation and a responsibility. I'm going to speak to you specifically about the fact that you have spent much of your 40 days talking about the importance of making sure that we don't reveal classified information, making sure that we don't leak information. You're a former battalion commander in the Army. I don't think that you would have necessarily appreciated the kind of leaking of information that I believe absolutely did happen in this Signal channel and is worthy of a further investigation. In fact, this committee established something called 50 U.S.C. 3235A, and this committee, on a bipartisan, apartisan basis, requires you, the DNI, to swiftly notify Congress and the Intelligence Committee if you're aware of any sort of significant unauthorized disclosure or compromise of classified information, which I would argue this has all of the markings of being that. And so if you, as the DNI, see such a thing anywhere within your organization's purview, you have the obligation to begin an investigation to report back to us on that. Would this seem to qualify to you as something worthy of that investigation?
Thank you for your question, Congresswoman. In this situation, Secretary Hegseth has the classification and declassification authority over DOD information.
This chat did not have the auspice of being a DOD chat. There's no such thing as labeling it as DOD. This was a chat amongst a great variety of people, and you, according to our law that we passed here bipartisanly, have an obligation when you think there has been a tangible, significant leak of information to instigate an investigation. Do you not think it's important to do such a thing?
Well, the National Security Council is investigating
Yes or no?
this inadvertent leak. And again, I point to Secretary Hegseth as having the classification.
I would argue that
classification
Secretary
authority.
Hegseth, if he had the dignity that he needs to have, should be walking his resignation in, because I believe that his probably is heading toward being relieved of his duty based on what I think are significant and illegal leaks, most likely. I would like it if you would please commit to this organization that you will follow the law, and I would like it if you would also investigate what is likely to be more than just this chat. Because if there's one, there's more than one. If there's smoke, there's fire. Would you please obligate yourself and your organization to that investigation?
Yeah, Congresswoman, yes, I will follow the law.
I want to make the argument that Tulsi Gabbard looks like she died yesterday. She is so uncomfortable. Look at her. She was a squadron commander. Look at how uncomfortable she is. And I thought Chrissy was just amazing. I have to say, my hat's off to her.
And it was a long clip, but it was important because she really held her feet to the fire. We're so used to these, 5-minute clips where they don't really have a chance to talk. She really nailed her. And also, we're looking for leaders, new leaders of the resistance. And so I'm glad you've introduced us really to a congresswoman that probably a lot of us don't know, but maybe we should keep our eye on.
So too.
Yeah. Talking about it wasn't an attack plan. It was a war plan, or wasn't a war plan. There was an article in the New York Times today that I didn't have time to add. Didn't want to burden Rex with it. But it was listing all of the different explanations that have come from different people in the administration. And there were I didn't write them down, but 12 different conflicting explanations. Like, oh, it wasn't a war plan, it was an attack plan. Oh, no, we didn't do it, someone else did it. No, it was but they all kind of, it's like, reminds me of the thing about the guy whose neighbor complains that he returns his bucket damaged, and he said, I never borrowed your bucket, it was damaged when you lent it to me. But here there's like 30, and I don't live here, and I don't know you, and I don't use buckets. I mean, it's like one lie after another that all contradict each other. One last thing I wanted to say about, well, first of all, two other things I would say. One is, this sloppiness is not new, right? I mean, Trump was like this all through his first administration. I mean, he used like a Gmail account, throughout his entire administration, which was completely insecure. He did it because he wanted to evade the National Records Act, because that way he could delete whatever emails or keep aside whatever emails he didn't want to reveal. But remember the email scandal, the non-scandal about Hillary Clinton that went on for a year in the newspaper, even though she did not break a law or even an administrative policy, and she did not compromise national security, and it was not penetrated. And yet, nothing happened with all of this basically national insecurity as a way of life, as a set of procedures. He's been using, his cell phone all through his first presidency, and probably now as well, which is completely hackable. But of
John,
course,
I don't mean to correct you, but he's never written an email in his life. It's all the texting he was doing on his phone. That's what he does. He's never written an email. I mean, I don't think he knows anything about it. Okay.
But anyway, it was all on his phone. It was all hackable. Now, some of it's sloppy and stupid, but I also think there's a kind of also a more malign explanation, which is he doesn't care if Russia intercepts our communications. He would CC them if he could, and probably is. If there's any documents they're looking for, they only have to go to the bathroom at Mar-a-Lago and check them out from the lending library. So anyway, but the one last thing I want to say about the hypocrisy is, everybody who was on that signal call, on that signal communication, when the Hillary email scandal was taking place, all made public statements about how completely unacceptable this kind of sloppiness around national security is. So someone put together a little montage of all of the signal people saying that she should be ashamed of herself.
If there was anyone other than Hillary Clinton, they would be in jail right now.
Nobody is above the law, not even Hillary Clinton, even though she thinks she is.
Mishandling classified information is still a violation of the Espionage Act.
When you have the Clinton emails, on top of the fact that the sitting president of the United States admitted he had documents in his garage, they didn't prosecute, they didn't go after these folks.
Hillary Clinton responded tonight with this: "You have got to be kidding me."
Other emails. Well, I guess all of them. I guess they're going to lock them up then. All the people on the Signal chat, right?
Of course, look how terrible they are. You can't make this stuff up.
You can't make this stuff up. Well, we have a wonderful guest today, Joe Walsh, who we've had on before, so we know he's a tried and true wonderful guest. A lot of you probably know him as an MSNBC contributor. He's also a former congressman from Illinois, a former Tea Party congressman, now on the side of democracy. And I also want to let people know he has a podcast, a daily podcast. So you can watch The Social Contract with Joe Walsh any day of the week.
Hi, gentlemen.
Joe.
Hi.
Welcome back.
Harry, John,
Really good
great
to
to be with you both.
Yeah. So when you were last on the show, it was November. I think the election had just happened, and we were wondering, how far, how fast, how bad, would the descent of democracy be? I'm afraid that now that we're coming back to it just a few months later, it's really worse than we had even feared or predicted. Would you agree with that, Joe?
Yes. Is it worse? After he won in November, I knew that once he was sworn in, it was going to be a blitzkrieg. I think a lot of us knew that. I'm
Yeah.
forever disappointed that the Democrats from day one didn't see that, weren't ready for that, and we're 2.5 months in, and there's still too many fucking people who just do not understand what's happening right now.
Exactly. You know, my question has been, why isn't Kamala Harris coming out every single day denouncing everything she sees? And not to run for president again, just to say, look at what he's doing. Nothing from the Democrats.
And Harry, to your point, even if she has no intention of running again for anything, why isn't she out there every day? Why isn't Barack Obama out there every day? Why isn't Joe Biden saying something once a week? Why isn't George W. Bush out there screaming? I mean, you've got so many of us who, and I'm nothing special, but so many of us who literally put our lives on the line these last few years talking about what a threat he was. And so many people who have much bigger names than me or Adam Kinzinger, and they've just kept their mouths shut. But Harry, you make a great point. It goes to the Democrats. And I campaigned for Kamala Harris every damn day for 3 months. She said he was a fascist. She said he was a threat to democracy. And then poof, you go to his inauguration, you make nice, and then you're gone.
See, they're following the old rules. This is the problem with the Democrats. They keep bringing an email to a knife fight. They keep following the old rules, thinking that somehow that's going to preserve the system. You know, and the old rules are, you know, once there's a new president, the old presidents shut up. They don't criticize. Of course, Trump broke those rules, right? He was criticizing every day. But we can't protect democracy and still follow the Roberts rules of order. We really have to choose. But I think the Democrats' instinct. Thank you.
John,
for those of you who are listening
right now, I'd give you the biggest kiss ever. And it started at the beginning. Look, the three of us, Trump won fair and square. We accept the legitimacy of the result, unlike him and his supporters from 2020. But then it stops. Joe Biden accepts the result. Kamala Harris accepted the result. But then you don't accept who he is. So no way should Joe Biden have invited him to the White House. No fucking way should either one of them have gone to the inauguration of a man they believe is a fascist and a threat to our democracy. So you set this tone and the average guy and gal out there think, now, wait a minute, you were telling me he's this big threat, but you're having him over to the White House for tea? It's wrong.
Yeah.
That's wrong. And again, for guys like me who were part of that world and left that world, the Trump MAGA Republican world, and put everything on the line, and we said, okay, Democrats, I'm with you. I'm a Democrat for now. Here we go. Come on, man. This is a threat. And then they're not at war like we should be. It's deflating.
Yeah. You know, I want to talk to you about some of the court cases, because that's where the resistance is really happening right now. Obviously, it's sort of the last free safety, preventing them for the total fascist takeover. Were you going to say something? Go ahead.
I was going to say it's the strong safety, a little closer to the line. The free safety, the last one way back there, is the American people. But I'm with you.
Okay. Well, no, thanks for that correction. That's a good point, actually. And I've been, I think to me, the results have been somewhat mixed. I feel like a lot of the judges have been overly cautious, again, kind of going by, and of course we expect judges to go by the Marcus Queensberry rules, but still not really appreciating the full context. For example, many of these cases, they've refused to put a stay on these blatantly illegal firings, invasions of agencies, invasion of privacy. Tanya Chutkan said there'd be no irreparable harm if Elon Musk got his hands on the Treasury data, so she wouldn't put a stay. They didn't put a stay on the people who were saying these are illegal firings at the Institute for Peace. They didn't put a stay on the attorney inspector generals, all of whom were fired illegally. And the problem is, because this is a blitzkrieg, right? Because it is happening so fast, and we understand justice is slow, blitzkrieg is fast. But what you have are crimes in progress, okay? And so if I'm a judge and I see a crime in progress, and not a small crime, like a crime against democracy and the Constitution, right? The bank robbers have the stockings on their face. They have the machine guns in their hand. They're kicking down the door at the Institute for Peace. The first thing you do is say, stop, and let's evaluate whether this is legal. Because if you don't, like the Inspector General case that was filed a month ago, nothing's happened. In the meantime, what's happened to all their investigations, right? All their investigations have disappeared. Their documents have probably been destroyed. Even if they're reinstated 6 months from now, right, they'll be in an impotent position because all their subordinates will have been fired. So they won't really be able to be the guardrail of democracy that they're supposed to be. There won't be the independence that they're supposed to be, even though it says you cannot fire them without cause and notifying Congress. So we know it's illegal, and we know it's illegal in all 17 cases. So what did the judges do?
You're right. The courts have been overwhelmed, and that was part of Trump's strategy. And the courts, even within their tight bounds, as you said, should have recognized what was happening and just call a timeout everywhere. Because the truth is, and this is really true, 90% of what he and Musk are doing is just unconstitutional.
Right.
Here's the problem. So we are in a constitutional crisis. We've been in a constitutional crisis from the moment he was sworn in. Our founders gave us 3 independent branches of government. 3! From the moment he was sworn in, we've had 2, because the body that I work for, Congress, they abandoned being an independent branch of government adhering to the Constitution. I mean, they literally are just advisors to the president. So that leaves the courts and the American people. Most of these rulings, here's the bad, shitty word, eventually will go against Trump. But eventually, because real damage is being done. Donald Trump and Elon Musk had absolutely no constitutional authority to shut down USAID, to shut down the Department of Education. None. And in fact, it just bums me out. People are so uninformed, only Congress can decide how to spend congressionally appropriated money. So they can't even fight. President Trump can't even fire people constitutionally. But we're so far down that rabbit hole. I think, John, eventually the courts are going to catch up, but there's immense damage happening every day.
Right. But there's a fourth.
It's also all going to end up at the Supreme Court. And that's what Trump is banking on, because he thinks they're in his pocket. And if they rule against him and he refuses to go along with it, then we're in the final step of the constitutional crisis, aren't we?
I'd inch a step forward, Harry. If Trump defies any court order, by definition, that's a constitutional crisis. If a federal judge says you have to do this, our system of government says the president has to do that. He can appeal the ruling. Congress can write another law, but that's it. But for a president to say, fuck you, court, I'm going to ignore you, that's uncharted territory. Any court, any judge, that'll happen, I think, before we get to the Supreme Court, because he's skirting that right now.
He is.
Well, I sort of describe this as a rolling constitutional crisis, or constitutional crisis as a way of life. There's so many hundreds of lawsuits, right? And they're finding all kinds of ways to evade the courts. For example, now we talked about Boasberg. He's fighting back, right? And he's demanding to see the manifest. And then they're refusing. They're just refusing to show him the manifest of them shipping the people he told them not to ship. And he's actually fighting back. But in a lot of these cases, for example, the judge did reinstate USAID. And you know what they did? They decided to shred all the documents at USAID. I don't know if that was halted. I think it was halted. But that, in other words, their first response is, oh, you want us to honor all the contracts? Okay, then we'll shred all the contracts. In other words, they're saying that Musk is not the head of Doge. In 170 lawsuits against Doge, they're saying the government is contending that Musk is not the head of Doge, even though he says it on social media. He says it from the Oval Office. Trump says it. So they have all kinds of ways to evade the court. It isn't even just one refusal, like Nixon saying, you can't have the tapes. You know what I mean? It's a sort of a rolling constitutional crisis.
He's everything our founding fathers feared, and it's happening in real time. And generally, when I go on TV or the radio, or I'm out there in any public speaking event, hey, America, you get the government you deserve. America, you knowingly elected this guy. He fucking told us what he was going to do. If I was the poorest member of Congress, I'd be a wealthy dude. If I had $1 last year, when I was out campaigning for Kamala, if for everybody who told me, Joe, I know he's an ass, I know he's a bad guy, but the Democrats suck, but the border, whatever. Like, we knowingly elected a bad person. A lot of people voted for him knowing that. And I don't know about you two. There's a part of me that believes the American people are going to have to feel real fucking pain.
I agree.
Absolutely.
Karma is karma.
Well,
this is their karma.
Yes, but what we've also been saying a lot, Joe, is that there are two trajectories. There's the rolling coup of Trump, and then there's his pathology, his psychopathology, which is he destroys everything that he tries to create. It's been true in his business life, you know, except for The Apprentice, which still got canceled, right?
Yeah.
So the question is, and he has no guardrails. So we're now looking at a 25% tariff on foreign auto and auto parts. That's going to destroy the economy in a few months.
It's interesting, isn't it, guys, when you think of Trump? I think he's a fucking idiot. But for some reason, he's always been enamored with the notion of tariffs. I know that most people around him believe it's a horrible idea. But like Harry, Trump's always cared about the market and the economy. And when I'm president, the market was like, he seems to be different now. Like, he knows the market's going to take a hit. I can't figure that one out.
One thing that John has been saying is that, and this comes from David Brooks, who we showed a clip of him earlier, but is that Trump isn't transactional. He's an extortionist. And a tariff is a weapon that you can extort people with. Different countries, you know, he's doing it everywhere, right? But he's always believed that tariffs were the best thing because you could beat people up with them. Because he was pushing in his first term too, wasn't he?
True, but I'd say even more than an extortionist, Donald Trump is the most outrageous psychopath, narcissist I've ever seen. The one constant with Trump is his whole life, the only thing he cares about is Trump, 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 Trump. And if he proceeds down this tariff road in a serious way, it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt Trump. It's going to hurt Republicans. They're going to get smashed in the midterms, which, by the way, again, brings me to my other point. We have always had a failure of imagination when it comes to Trump. How far will he go? How low will he go? I have no doubt that Donald Trump in his mind is thinking of, how could I cancel the midterms? How could I cancel the midterms? And anybody laughing at me right now, 15 years ago, if I'd have told you a president's going to lose and never accept the result and then try to overthrow the election, don't you fucking tell me he might not try to stop the midterms from happening.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I have a theory, equally paranoid, but slightly more complex, which is he's going to try to rig the midterms rather than cancel the midterms. In other words, I think there's a race between how quickly he can alienate the majority of the American people, and he's off to a smashing start, right? He's going to crash the stock market, raise inflation, take away our Social Security, deport all the immigrants. So, you know, everybody's going to take a hit. Nobody's going to be unhurt, basically, except the billionaires, who will profit from even a bad stock market because then they can pick up stocks cheap. And so you would think, well, doesn't he care? And one aspect of, no, his pathology is just so extreme. He just knows how to destroy and intimidate. And, you know, he's this radically evil person, right, who doesn't care if he destroys everything. But the other theory is because it won't matter. Remember, he said you only need to vote once. And look at all the ways they're already trying to take control of the electoral system. You have to show a passport to register for vote, according to his latest executive order, or some proof of citizenship. They want to pass the SAVE Act, where a married woman can't vote if her name is different than the name on a birth certificate, unless she has a passport. And now they want to stop mail-in voting, no counting of mail-in votes after, you know, election day, and you're going to need a passport to vote. They're going to keep finding ways to rig the election.
Yeah, John. But remember, all of that shit he can't do. That executive order from yesterday on, that's all symbolic. The states in this country decide how each election's run in each state. So Trump can't do anything there. But I get your broader point, and I would counter with this. All the data right now shows three things. Elon Musk, his favorability is fucking tanking.
Right.
Sure. Donald Trump's numbers are holding really steady. Not surprisingly so. Again, I think Democrats make this mistake. There are more people in this country who like the stuff he's doing than Democrats have ever realized. I can say that because I come from that world.
Yeah.
And the third data point is the Democratic Party's brand is in the fucking toilet. So as long as, even if Trump sucks, as long as he is 20 points above where the Democrats are, he feels confident.
Mm-hmm. So how do you see it playing out?
I think that Donald Trump is looking for a way to put our military on the streets this summer or next.
I agree.
To stop the election, adhere to the Insurrection Act, and we're at war, and stop the midterm election, assuming that the numbers for Trump and Republicans don't look good. I know that Trump and some of his people believe, because they look at the numbers, that Trump can weather this 3 or 4 month storm and be in good shape politically next year. If Trump's in good shape politically next year, then election's on. But my fear is he wants to put our military on the streets and go after the American people, who I believe this resistance to Trump, like we all checked out for a couple of months after he won. But you know, 1,000 what was George? 1,000 light
points of light.
Oh, George H.W. Bush, my kingdom for you. 1,000 points of light. Like the resistance organically has been springing up all over the country.
Yes.
And when it warms up, I think you're going to see major protests out there. And I think Trump's licking his chops at that stuff.
He's waiting.
I think you're right. George Conway made a good point. He said, you know, there's a reason why all the revolutions are in the spring, you know, the Arab Spring, the Prague Spring, because spring, it gets warm. You know, let's say it's protest weather, you know, it's protest season. I agree with you, Joe. He's going to use those protests as an excuse to put the military in the street. He can't wait. He can't wait. And no one's going to stop him. Hegseth and, those people, illegal order, schmillegal order. They're not going to care. And it's going to be in a state of emergency, blah, blah, blah. And there's not going to be any espers to say, don't shoot the protesters in the leg.
And then, John, to your point on the elections, so then Trump comes out next year and says, nope, the country's at war, no elections. Well, then the state of my home state of Illinois, run by Democrats, says, sorry, bucko, we're having elections. And then Trump sends the military into Illinois, and some of the military follows his orders, some don't. And Trump's got a lot of support among law enforcement. Some cops get involved, some don't. And then it just creates a real mess in Illinois, and people are afraid to vote in Illinois. And then Governor Pritzker says, well, now we can't have the election. So in a way, Trump's going to try to create his own emergency.
Of course. Absolutely. Yeah. Like the Reichstag fire, right? I mean, that's really part of the dictator's playbook. Create an emergency and then exploit that emergency as a chance to take extraordinary power.
By the way, Harry and John, can I stop us? Would you listen to the three of us? We're talking about the United States of America. Listen to the way we're speaking right now.
I know. We're all men of a certain age. And I think that, we've lived a large part of American history, not to mention having studied it. Yeah. So we really know what's normal, right? And now that's what's really slipping away, right? Just the basic understanding of the Constitution, of the separation of powers. Every single one of these norms seems to fall, and then people sort of just forget about it.
Well, we have the rise of the low information voter. They don't know the history. They don't understand what's at stake. I want to add one thing about the our not having a leader on the other side without Kamala Harris coming out and challenging. There's a technique in psychotherapy, Joe, called predicting the symptom. So if you tell a patient what they're going to be doing symptomatically, sometimes they don't do it because you've already predicted it. If we had a leader like Kamala Harris who could come out, 6 months from now and say, he's going to try to cancel the elections. Watch everybody. It's going to happen. That would take some of the wind out of the sails of that kind of action. But we don't have anyone doing that.
Agreed. I was a Republican my whole life. Mr. Crazy Tea Party. I'm homeless now. If I were a Democrat, and if I was even thinking about running for president, you know how all candidates wait like a couple of years before the election? So like in 26, they'll come out and announce, fuck that. If I were a Democrat and I were even thinking about running for president in 28, I'd have come out a month and a half ago, a week after the Blitzkrieg, John, began. Because, again, literally, he's declared war on the country. So, you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to come out now, and I'll be that voice, and I'll be out there every day. Politically, it would be a smart thing to do, but it's also the right thing to do because, Harry, you're right. The opposition needs that voice now, not 2 years from now.
Right. That's a great point.
Well, Fareed Zakaria was so smart. It recently said that Biden didn't understand the information economy. That's why he's old-fashioned. Trump understands if you dominate the news cycle every single day, you win. That's what he did after he lost. He just dominated the news cycle. And so you're absolutely right. If someone wants to be president, they better start yesterday.
But nobody will do that.
No one.
I would do that. Nobody will do that. Because, and it's the same thing we've been talking about from the beginning. There's a lack of appreciation for the fact that these are not fucking normal times. Right. I mean, Chuck Schumer, are you fucking kidding me? Right, please. Right. Like Chuck Schumer talking about a Republican Party from 1990 when Bob Dole was the minority leader. Those days are done. And here's the other thing, like, you're right. Donald Trump puts his mug in front of us every day because all he is a marketer and he gets it. But Democrats have, like, regular working class people decided this election. And regular working class people told me every fucking day that they want to pick the bad guy because they think he's listening to them over the political party that looks down on them. Guys, I heard that everywhere I went.
That's really interesting.
The Democratic Party has just utterly lost touch of. They're seen of as elitist. And MSNBC, smart experts, and Fareed Zakaria, blah, blah, blah. I need fucking warriors. I need working class warrior Democrats because they've lost that.
Yeah, and we had, and look at Bernie getting what, 60,000 people with AOC. I mean, it's incredible.
And you're right. And I again, Bernie's politics may not be mine. I wish he were younger because Bernie, you're right. Even though Bernie's leftist, Bernie is a populist. He's a fighter. And that Democrats need that out there.
Yeah, I would love a more moderate populist for sure.
Isn't that funny, Harry? We need a populist from the middle. Is that an oxymoron? I don't know. A centrist populist. I don't know. That's what we need.
The center is now 2 standard deviations from the reality. So the definition of center has changed. And by the way, you mentioned this war on the country. That's exactly what it is, and I think people don't appreciate that. He's declared war on the government, the courts, the press, the immigrants, the left, all of the universities, medical research, and he's working for Vladimir Putin. So he's declared war on the country in 2 ways. Internally, he's trying to collapse it from within, and that might even include the stock market if he doesn't think it'll hurt him politically. And externally, he's allied with our greatest enemy. I mean, I don't think it could be much worse.
God, John, in a nutshell, you just put it all. I went on CNN a month ago now, and I just blurted it out because I was so pissed off. I said, Donald Trump's a Russian asset. Period.
Period. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, the host of the show was very uncomfortable, and he said, "Well, there's no proof of that." But John, to your point, even if they're not ready to go there, what we do know is he's firmly standing with Putin in this fight between Putin and the free world. Trump, J.D. Vance, and by the way, America now are no longer on the side of the free world.
I know.
That is what it is.
That breaks my heart, as well as scaring the hell out of me. It just really, we showed a German politician after the breakup over Zelensky, and he was talking about how America's not our partner anymore. And he starts to cry. He starts to cry on the stage. And when he's weeping, everyone on the stage starts clapping. In other words, they're all empathizing with not just the anger and the fear, but the pain. This is like your spouse of 35 years just saying, I never really loved you. I'm eloping to, Costa Rica with the secretary. It's such a betrayal.
Well, agreed. And as an American world, I apologize. I'm so sorry. But Europe's got to fucking wake up and accept that horrible truth that right now, America is not on your side.
I think they're definitely waking up to it. I feel like they're moving quickly on it. Here in Paris, I watch the news every morning, and the way that the general network covers it is all about that. It's all about supporting a strong Europe in the face of this betrayal of America.
It makes me sad, guys. I wish Zelensky and Macron and all of Europe would just say, respectfully, America, for the next 4 years, and give us the middle finger. I wish Zelensky and Europe wouldn't keep begging for Trump's help. No, I wish they'd stand up to him and say, Donald Trump, you've decided what side you're on. I think it sucks, but we're going to do what we have to do. Maybe they can't do that because they really do need our help, but I wish they would.
Mm-hmm. I think they're going to have to. At some point, they will. I'm confident. They can't trust this guy. He's a monster.
Hey, we are We are 249 years old. In the summer of 2026, it'll be our, what do you call that? Our centennial, something or other.
I don't know.
There is a formal name for it, but we'll be 250 years next July 4th in 26. Look, we've had a great run. I'm not trying to be cute or provocative. Back when I was in Congress, before Trump ever ran, I would put the question in front of my constituents because I've been worried about this. Can we still stay together? I think we're like a married couple on the verge of a divorce. I think Trump is like the last, our last ugly consequence, but we've got to decide if we want to stay together. I'll say this, guys, the beauty of Trump. Oh, man, the fucking beauty of Donald Trump is that because he's so bad, so lawless, so authoritarian, so corrupt, he's literally forcing us in real time to decide what kind of country we want to be. I mean, in real time, rule of law or not. I mean, Putin or not, he's forcing us.
Right. So, Joe, before the show, you and I were talking about that you think maybe Harry shouldn't come back from Paris because they might not let him back in the country. And we all kind of, haha. And then he said, well, I'm kind of not kidding. I like to take a little index here, the risk index. So I asked George Conway, how much risk do you think we're at? You know, we're the lowest level of the intelligentsia. You know, we're the talking heads 3 levels down from MSNBC. But still, they're trying to get everyone, right? They're trying to silence everyone. So, Joe, what would your assessment be of our risk, the 3 of us, I mean, our risk indicator, and what kind of fears or fantasies do you have, or are you feeling confident?
Oh, I'm scared to death. Look, from the moment I came out against Trump, gosh, almost 7 years ago now, I've lived with daily and weekly threats. It's gotten much worse since he was sworn in. And so, Harry, before you came on, John and I were talking. We have a family wedding in London this summer. I've never been to London. I've never been anywhere. But I am legitimately afraid about going because I'm afraid about getting back home. I'm afraid about being let back home. So, John, to answer your question, again, I'm not at the top of Trump's enemies list. I know I'm on the list, but I also know you two are. I also know they have an in-depth list of everyone who's even minutely public to super public who opposes them. And it's their aim to go after all of us.
So we're not on the A enemies list. It's the B list or the C list. But as Harry says, you know, look, it's so political who gets on those lists. I mean, we probably deserve to be on the A list, but I'm just saying.
You can buy your way to Mar-a-Lago, John. You could buy your way on the A list. No, but you are. You two are. What a horrible thing to say that the 3 of us I would even joke with Harry, could you get back in? Who knows? Who knows?
Well, Joe,
Harry is supporting equipment in the catacombs next week, right?
Listen, Joe, it's been so great to have you. I just want to underscore something you said a moment ago. I thought that was so profound, that the extremity of Trump is forcing the country to really look at itself and make a decision. And I think that's something I'm going to think about over the next few days.
I think it's these words don't belong in the same sentence, but it's a beautiful gift Trump has given us because he's an utterly horrible human being. He's forcing us to decide in real time, what kind of country do we want to be? Do we want to be the kind of country where our government can snatch you up off the street and detain you because of your beliefs? Hey, we get to decide because Trump is doing that every single day. And you go on down the list. We have to decide, should we be a nation of laws or not? And by the way, guys, do we want to be ruled by a king. He's forcing us to decide that as well.
And a mad one.
And a mad one.
Yeah.
Mad one at that. Well, Joe, we're going to have you back on the show, assuming that you haven't already used your phone call.
You'd be my first call. Harry would be my first call.
And as my mother used to like to tell this joke, someone was depressed and her friend said, "Look, cheer up, things could be worse." And sure enough, they got worse.
They got worse.
So
don't stop laughing. We all gotta laugh.
No. We're heading into more storms.
Completely.
Right.
Completely.
But
love
thank
you
you
both.
for coming on. Love you
Yeah,
too.
and go to London and enjoy it. No, but enjoy London. You're gonna love it.
Harry, you get home safe.
I will do my best. Thanks so much.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Yeah, good seeing you. Thank you. Bye-bye. Well, it's always really good to have a breath of fresh air and some cold water on as well to really sort of see things in the stark light.
I think he's your soulmate, John. I think you guys really connect.
He is actually. He's a fighter. He's a fighter, not a.
But that last point of his was just very profound. I'm going to keep thinking about it.
Yeah, me too. Well, Harry, I guess we come to the shrink wrap section of the show. What have we learned today?
After speaking with Joe Walsh, I think we learned to be more terrified. At least I did. I know that I'm here to help people feel better, and I really do believe that everything I've said every week is the same thing, which is we are powerless individually, but we're not powerless as a group. That is, if we maintain awareness, if we spend an hour or two every day informing ourselves and hearing about activism, that's really great. But please, after that hour or however much time it is, but don't make it half your day. Then you have to live your life, and you have to love your family and your partner and your children and your dogs, your students, whoever it is in your life. And you need to find beauty in it, because that's your job anyway, no matter what's going on in the world. So that's what I want to leave you with.
I think what we learned is that basically Trump is a one-trick pony. It's extortion, extortion, extortion in every environment, but in every possible creative and devious way that you could think of. And the problem with extortion is it works. And the other problem with extortion is it divides and conquers. Because if a few people submit, then the other people are left flapping in the breeze. So it does come back down to what Benjamin Franklin said, that if we don't hang together, we shall surely hang separately.
I just want to leave, John, I'm going to answer one thing though. Don't forget that Joe McCarthy used extortion for almost 2 years. And then one day someone stood up to him, and there was a consensus that formed that said, no more. And that's what we're hoping for, that there'll be suddenly a consensus of resistance. And we're seeing it build. It's not absent. It's not absent. So there is some hope out there for us to think about, but we have to be extremely vigilant. We just do.
The other thing we confirmed with Joe Walsh is that we are on the enemies list. Though I feel our position is unfair and really not proportional to our accomplishments. But as you know, it's political, so hey, what are you going to do?
Well, narcissism comes in all shapes and sizes, John.
Because I'm the best enemy. Everyone's saying it.
Everyone says it. Everyone knows it.
Everyone knows it.
Listen, John, before we go, we need to tell the audience. Oh, first of all, to the audience, my computer died halfway through the filming of this. I'm now on an iPad. That's why I'm looking kind of different, because it's a different camera and a different light. But in any case, John and I were able to get hold of a transcript
of a call between Trump and Vladimir Putin, and we wanted to enact it for you. So we're going to do that as we do with the mighty shrinking Trump players.
Yes, and again, you're welcome, folks, for this this hard-hitting reporting that you won't get from the mainstream media, but we have gotten the transcript.
We do. Greetings, Agent Trump. We have some propaganda for you to launder.
Oh, no money to launder?
No. Now pay attention. Are you ready for your points talking?
I'm always paying attention. I have a perfectly wonderful mind. It's a great mind. I get the signal.
Yes, I heard about the signal. Zelensky is a capitalist running dog. Can you see that?
Yeah. He's eating the dogs and the cats. Everyone's saying it.
No, pay attention. Say he is a dictator.
That's right. Well, his dictator isn't as big as mine. There's no problem down there, I can assure you.
This isn't about your dictator, you narcissist. Repeat after me. The rain in Ukraine must be Kremlin.
Ukraine is going to give me gain, especially rare earth metals.
Yeah. Just put JD on the phone. I'd rather talk to him.
No, Vlad. You and I are buddies. We don't need him. We're the dynamic duo. Let's just sway to the music, shall we?
Oh, Donald, you monsieur. That means lunatic. You are my monsieur.
Hit it, Rex.
Yes.
Who?
All right, Donald. Next time we talk to JD. Goodbye, folks. Have a good week. Make sure to come back next time here on Shrinking Sumashia. Donald.
Who?